Well, we are, as I announced last week, changing our format this week just a bit. And so after the talk this morning, you're going to have an opportunity to share your thoughts, to ask any questions you may have, and anything about the topic that we're talking about today. September is always sort of that transition month between hot summer and the beginnings of fall. And I just felt like doing something different. The book of the month that we did last month with Conversations with God really had me reflecting on many of these beliefs that many of us grew up with. I know I did in the Methodist Church and with the religious studies and so forth that I did back then, and the Bible stories and the way that I was taught those stories, and recognizing the the tentacles that are still present in me for some of those beliefs, surprisingly, after all this time and study, and the influence that it's had on society as a whole, on the, as Holmes would call it, the race consciousness, universal consciousness, or collective consciousness, that we can see the impacts of some of these beliefs running through society. So I wanted to talk about some of those things and share those with you. These are my beliefs. My series this month is called Myth Busting. And as my religious studies teacher used to say, I wasn't there. I don't know. But I can tell you what I believe. I can tell you what I've studied, what Science of Mind teaches. And so that's the perspective that I'm going to be looking at some of these topics on for the rest of this month. So it sounds like fun to me. I hope it sounds like fun to you. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and perspectives after the talk as far as what you believe about these things. Be interested to have your sharing with us. So, um, my series is myth busting, but today we're going to start with my title, Heaven, Hell, and Original Sin. Thought we'd just jump right in. So it's kind of the bookends of life. Original sin. We're all supposedly born that way, and then what happens when we die? Heaven or hell, right? We've been taught these things. These ideas truly do permeate society. One of the ideas in the book about original sin is that God keeps talking to Neil Donald Walsh and saying, "Why do you beat yourself up so much about stuff? Why are you embarrassed about things? Don't you know your magnificence?" And Neil is like, "Well, he goes, yeah, you've been taught this all your life, right?" And so that's kind of the permeation of societal thought. So as I looked at this idea of original sin, it's a Christian doctrine. And it teaches that all humans, simply by the fact that we are born, inherit a tainted nature that requires fixing over our entire lives, and that we're predestined, if you will, to sin. And then there's a whole process to make that go away, sort of. We'll talk about that more a little bit into. So where did it come from? Where did it start? Who came up with this idea? Well, my research indicates that it came from basically three scriptures in the Bible, just three out of that whole big book, just three. The first is Genesis 3. And Genesis, of course, is the very first book of the Bible. And it's the creation story. And Genesis 3 is where God boots them out of Eden. You messed up, right? It's the first angry God we have in the Bible, is getting them kicked out of Eden. You did bad, you've sinned, and you're out of here, right? And then the next one is Psalm 51. And that one simply says, "And in sin did my mother conceive me." Now, that could be interpreted a lot of different ways. Romans 5, this is Paul talking to Romans, and he says, "Just as sin entered the world through one man." Now, the one man, of course, they're talking about Adam. And the idea with us inheriting this is that Adam is our great, 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 many great grandfather, right, of all of us, because he was the first man. And we're all inherited this from Adam. And that's what this is all talking about. Ernest Holmes might say, it is offensive to the intellect to jump to such conclusions. I can hear him saying those words. But jump they did. And Christianity has had a little bit of a male dominant perspective on life. Now, I'm not bashing Christianity, I'm just bringing to light what is written and what has been interpreted. And that really, for me, is part of the purpose of the series of talks, is the interpretation that we've grown up with, many of us, that maybe we've shifted intellectually, but maybe, as I found out, some of those tentacles are still there of this belief system that has been ingrained in us. I was reading, or I'm listening to, a Napoleon Hill book, and in it the guy said, if I had a child from the birth through the age 7, I could create basically all of its ideals and ideas and belief systems and everything, because that's when we learn all this stuff, is from 0 to 7 years old. And it takes a long time to transform that as we become more conscious and aware. So some of the examples that we can think of is that women were not allowed an education. That's a relatively recent, in the whole timeline of the world, a relatively recent development, when women could start becoming teachers and nurses, right? Then it was something else and something else and something else. And the first women in law school, the first women in medical school, those were big deals, right? Those were big deals. Also, women could not work outside of the home. Could not work outside of the home. In this book written around the 19th century, he's talking about male secretaries and the career path for male secretaries. There were no female secretaries at the turn of the century. And then one of the most interesting ones to me, everybody's heard of supply and demand, that economic concept. Prostitution. Supply and demand. If there was not demand, there would not be supply. But women are the ones that are typically persecuted for that. And women couldn't vote until the 1920s, when we went out and protested to get that. We were not given that right when we helped found this country. And it's been okay for men to have multiple wives, but I don't know any place that's had multiple husbands. Girls, do you know? I'm not man bashing. I promise I'm not. I'm not man bashing. But you can see where the idea of Eve took the fruit from the serpent and coerced her husband into doing it against his will, and then they got booted out, and therefore Adam is the father of all sin. You can see where it gets a little twisty. Yes? Is it just me? Okay, a little twisty. So the belief about original sin, that universal stain, or all those funny, interesting phrases that have been coined over time, didn't emerge until the 3rd century. Now, this is 300 years after Jesus. And if you read Jesus' teaching in the New Testament, he didn't talk about these things. He did not talk about these things. And St. Augustine of Hippo, he was a Roman, and it was at the end of the Roman Empire, kind of the crashing of the Roman Empire. But he wasn't in Rome. He was over in the Ireland area, over in that part of the world. And he put all of this together and said, yeah, that's what it is. And he began teaching this, and people grasped onto it and said, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, that we can't help ourselves, because as humans, we've tried to come up with reasons for bad things in the world. We blame God, right? We've had an angry and capricious God because we're trying to figure out and understand why bad things happen. Why is there evil in the world, right? And again, back to our book last month, the Conversations with God. In it, it's very interesting that he keeps saying, it's not me. It's not me. It's the freedom of choice that humankind has. That's the point he keeps making in this, because Neil Donald Walsh keeps asking that question, what about evil? What about evil? And he goes, it's not me. It's not me. Now, the other part of this is really interesting. Martin Luther and John Calvin came about, and they started saying that baptism won't take care of this original sin. And so they stopped christening babies, they stopped doing baptisms, and then they went, oh gosh, this doesn't work. We got to change this all up. So they changed the story again and said, no, it does work. We christen babies because it washes away the original sin to begin with, protects the infant. And they also espoused that we lost our free will. So it's like, okay, what's the point? If we are born in sin, we have no free will, we have no free choice. How on earth do we ever get to heaven? Illogic, isn't it? A little bit illogic. And we're going to talk about that next week, this idea of how we get to heaven. But today we're going to talk about heaven and hell. Heaven and hell. If you've been around New Thought for any length of time, you've probably heard the phrase, heaven and hell are not places we go when we die. They are the experiences that we create through poor choices, right? Or good choices or poor choices. It's an experience, it's not a place. But my question for us today is, have we taken that beyond our intellect? Have we moved that idea into our heart and into our actions, into our true beliefs? Or is there still a tendency to dodge the lightning bolt when something bad is said? Or, the old Flip Wilson statement, the devil made me do it. That's the kind of thing, right? It's permeated society. It's permeated society, these belief systems that we even if we don't come from a religious background, it's out there. We've seen it on the comedian stage, right? With Flip Wilson doing that on TV back in the 60s, 70s. Yeah. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, how are we living our lives? Are we living our lives as if we are unlovable, as if we're unworthy, as if we're less than magnificent? Are we making empowering decisions and choices in our life that lead us to living in heaven every day? Are we still having those hellish experiences? How are we living the teaching? Has it become real to us? Have we set aside those old beliefs? What ancestral baggage are we hauling? Again, race consciousness, universal consciousness, those things that are just there that we're dragging around without realizing it. I mean, I was surprised when some of mine came up in reading of this book. It's like, wow, I really thought I'd healed that stuff. And there it is. And there it is. From our reading in the book, we're told that hell is the worst possible outcome of our choices, decisions, and creations. And this is in line with science of mind teaching, because we teach cause and effect, right? We teach the cause and effect, that we are at the effect of the causes that have been set in motion. And we've all been there. We've all held on to an idea, made a poor choice, have a belief that we're holding on to, and we experience the effects of that in our lives until we know better. Because when we know better, we do better, don't we? When we know more about what the subtleties of lack consciousness are, we can begin to change our thinking around that and begin to lead a more prosperous life. The book also says hell is the opposite of joy. And that resonated with me, particularly in light of what I shared this morning in gratitude for the um, no complaining process, complaint free. That I really have made that decision that nobody's going to steal my joy, because truly, hell is the opposite of joy. It is unfulfillment in knowing who and what you are and failing to experience it. Now, I thought of a baseball player, a good baseball player, and the coach goes, go out there and play. And he goes, all right, I'm ready to go play. And he goes onto the field, and they tie his hands behind his back. And I say, okay, go play. He's like, well, I can't catch the ball. I can't throw the ball. I can't swing the bat. I probably can't run very well. So he is experiencing that. It's unfulfillment and knowing who and what he is. He knows he's a great baseball player, but he's unfulfilled because he's failing to experience it. Yeah. And have we ever been there? Have we ever been upset about something and gone to an event that is magnificent? But because we're upset about something and it's in the past and we're holding on to it, we're not present in this beautiful moment right now, we're creating that, aren't we? Because we're choosing to stay in the upset. When we choose to argue and be angry and not take care of our physical body, all of these choices can create hell on earth, can't they? Those can create hell on earth for us. Excuse me. If God is love, and I believe God is love, and if we are one, which I believe we are all one in God, how could love separate itself from itself and create a horrific place of suffering that it would experience throughout eternity? That's kind of what we're saying, isn't it? It's a belief in two powers, or it's a belief in one power who does two different things. God cannot put God in any creation in hell or on earth. Only we can do that through our choices that we make. Another perspective that I found in my research was the Eastern Orthodox perspective. And that is that when we die, we might have a hellish experience when we return to heaven, to God. Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. And it's like that example that I gave of if we're holding on to something. Let me do another example. Hitler. Hitler's always a good one to talk about evil, right? We all agree that's probably not a good time in history. In the book, he said Hitler went to heaven, and I was a little shocked by that statement that would be stated like that in the book. But the Eastern Orthodox viewpoint says that we might have a hellish experience. If Hitler's darkness went to heaven, because we all go to heaven, if Hitler's darkness went there, the light would be so uncomfortable and so hard for him to take, he'd be miserable, wouldn't he? He would feel like he was in hell. Interesting perspective. Interesting perspective. As far as the afterlife, for me, this is just personal. I think the teaching that we teach, it's done as we believe, continues on. Holmes taught that we take our personality and our consciousness with us. That was part of his belief. And that's very much this Eastern Orthodox belief. And if we are taking a dark consciousness, a negative consciousness, we might have those negative experiences. Whereas if we're taking light and we're going to light, we might have a light experience. I haven't done it yet. I'll let you know maybe when I get there, but I'll probably see you there for sure. But I believe it will be awesome. What do you believe? Have you ever thought about it? What do you believe? Ernest Holmes is the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living. He's also the author of The Science of Mind that we teach from. And he says there's nothing in the universe that can harm us. We create our own heaven and our own hell through the quality of our thinking. We do not deny the existence of evil in the world, but it has nothing to do with God or the devil. It is due to ignorant choices of human beings based on fear. We will never solve the problem of evil until we place the responsibility where it belongs, with human beings. So let's move to our practicing the principles this morning. Practicing the principles is the way that we take our teaching home with us and we apply it in our lives. And you can receive a recap of this talk. It's called Mindful Monday. Comes out every Monday morning. Gives you the details of the practicing the principles plus some of the quotes. And you can sign up with the QR code online or in the lobby. So, number one, what do you think about these topics? Take some time this week and do some journaling about original sin, heaven, and hell. Get in touch with what it is that you believe. And then look at number two, how do you live those thoughts? Are they still intellectualized or are they embodied and how you express in the world? Did the devil make you do it or have you really let that go? We can look for reflections all around us when things happen. And sometimes it's a societal thing that it's almost a call and response when somebody has an expression about grief or health or finances, oh my gosh, this recession, whatever we're calling this thing that's supposedly coming. So how we react to those things, are those old tentacles of belief that are still there, or is it your new thought? Is it truly your new thought that you're embodying? And finally, is cleaning out that old ancestral baggage, getting in touch with, recognizing what those are, and cleaning out that old baggage to be sure and let go of those hellish days and create more days, heavenly days for yourself. So we'll close it out this morning with a quote from Reverend John Shelby Spong, who said, "I believe Christianity is about the expanded life, heightened consciousness, and achieving a new humanity. It is not about closed minds, supernatural inventions, a fallen creation, guilt, original sin, or divine rescue." And so it is. And now it's your turn. Now it's your turn. What do you believe about heaven, hell, and original sin? All right. Diane's got the microphone. Oh, that mic's not working. All right. Okay. Well, we got this one. You couldn't possibly have agreed with everything I said. All right. You did? Good deal.
Okay.
Oh,
So you brought it up, Hitler.
yes.
But I read a book recently. It's called The Choice. And so in The Choice, this woman talks about her perspective of she was actually in a concentration camp. She's one of the few remaining people to be alive, that is still alive, that went through, obviously, hell on earth, right? But in it talks about how, when she was on the bus to go there, she was laying on her mom's lap, and her mom kept saying, "We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen." But nobody can take away what's in your mind, right? And so the whole time she's there, she talks about all the things that were happening to them, but that in her mind, she was creating this space of like seeing herself free and what she was going to do when she was freed and everything. So I just thought that was, she chose her thoughts the whole time she was there, and she actually saw one person in the camp with the lady was fine and healthy and was like, "We'll get out by Christmas. We'll get out by Christmas." And when Christmas came and they weren't out, she passed away. It was like, just because it was so ingrained in her mind that she was going to get out by Christmas. But I guess my question or my thought is, like, everybody has different beliefs, right? So we all have those. I have some, what did you call them? Tentacles? Yeah, there's some of those too.
Tentacles.
But so I call it my belief lineage, right? Where I've tried to trace it back to when I first learned whatever it was. And that's something that everybody probably has. So with all that, how do you collectively move ahead, right? And what I've learned from my studies, from my school and all this, it's like one at a time, right? If I can get to that higher consciousness and people see that and they question it, and then Jennifer gets there, Joe gets there, Lori gets there, then that's how we do it. So I guess that's what I like to keep in my mind.
Yeah.
And then just the thought process. Like, I feel like I'm in mind school. Like, how good can I get my mind?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Very good.
So anyways, that's for mine.
Yep. Thank you. Yes. Holmes teaches us that in Science of Mind. If you get 1,000 people that truly believe and practice this, that will change the whole world. But it is that idea of truly, truly believe, practice, and embodying it, and getting ourselves to that point where those tentacles aren't, running us any longer. We're more clear in our subconscious, and we just keep practicing to get there.
When didn't we talk about the mind being the place where you create heaven and hell? Like your thoughts can do that for you.
Oh yeah.
Either you're living in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's within, so it's what you're thinking, doing, saying, believing, or it can be hell at that same thing, what you're thinking, doing,
Yeah,
saying, believing.
exactly.
I mean, obviously Hitler wasn't a happy person, but in the book it also states something about he went to a class to take a test to get into a school, and this Jewish kid had begged, pleaded, everything to take the test, and the Jewish kid got in and not him. And so it was like, this boy later on in life had written a book of like, was this his
Yeah.
first like experience that made
Yeah.
him get to the place he got to?
Yeah. His lineage, as you say. Yeah.
I have something to add.
All right.
Thank
Good.
you. What I just thought of, so just a little bit about my background. The past 3 decades, I've been immersed in Vedic sciences through my work. So I guess I kind of come from that space. And in the yogic tradition, we talk about samskaras. And samskaras are patterns, which we could think of as tentacles. And those tentacles, when we come into life, the idea is they come with us, which some could call karma. And the goal or the practice or the process is to be able to, it's not like to get rid of them, but really because they're part of us, because they're part of our past experience, if you believe in multiple lives. But the idea is to be able to use that witness consciousness to look at them, recognize them, and go, oh, I see you and I know what you are. And so they're not really like operating us anymore, because we can look at them as separate from ourselves and as not ourselves. And then we can minimize them. And then when something comes up and sort of rears its ugly head, we can go, I know what you are. I know what's going on. I know what you're doing. And that's not me. So
Yeah. Applying our energy, right? If we focus on those things, they just stay strong within us. And if we just recognize them and let them be and make peace with them, then they can dissipate and move away. Yeah, definitely. Demita, you may have to get up, sweetheart.
I'll sit next
Oh,
to
that one's not going through. They can't hear online.
So it's time to shed some humor on this. It's getting a little heavy.
Ooh, all right, Demita.
So I was thinking about Flip Wilson, and in my family, growing up in Cleveland, my grandmother was heavy on the devil. So everything was, you're acting like the devil, or the devil made me do it, like Flip Wilson would say. And when you were talking about women, in your talk, and just about all the things we have had passed on through the generations about women working, voting, and different things like that. I came from a family where my grandmother's sort of, being a little bit of a Jehovah Witness, always sort of thought of women as needing to be really modest. Everything was, you're looking like the devil. And so, and she used to always have this little saying, you better not date that boy. Don't let the devil get in your pocketbook. And it was like everything was centered around that. And so later on in life, it was kind of crazy because all of us were like kind of wild. So, it never really worked. It never really, really works to kind of shame people or women into believing that they're not going to do something, because we all are embodied with the spirit and with this divine presence that says, I don't understand this gender thing.
Mhm.
What is this gender thing? So anyway, I just wanted to share that part about the Flip Wilson. I thought it was kind of funny that you brought that up.
Well, she was affirming that you were the devil, and there you were. Went out and did devilish things. So it is. Who else? All right, Benny.
Okay, I'm real simple, and I've dropped the beliefs that I was raised with. because I don't need them. I don't believe in heaven or hell. But it was funny because this morning I was thinking about a friend of mine, my best friend who passed away. It's like, when I pass away, what's going to happen? Am I going to see him? Is he going to be busy? It's just really weird because we don't know so I want to go and come back. So, or somebody to tell me what's happening. And as for the devil within me thing, yes, my mother taught me that one really well, and I've dropped that too. There's no guilt because I'm doing whatever I choose to do. There's no reason for me to feel guilty about anything. So I don't know.
Good. All right. Diane, you may have to stand up, sweetie.
I always come back to what I've learned here with the science of mind and in LA at Agape, the science of mind for years is that we are all so magnificent from birth that the idea of original sin has been long gone in my life, although I did carry around a Presbyterian predestination thing, and that used to depress me that I was predestined to be a certain way. And my mother from the South, she said, "No, darling, you can just be anything you want to be, and you watch." And she's great. She was great. So I have to say I'm involved with several friends because I'm older. I'm 75, and I have a friend who's in a hospice, and I'm going to California to be with her. And I read a book that Jill had brought up for me, Ram Dass, who a famous Buddhist teacher 20 years ago, called "Walking Each Other Home." And this book, I read it in a day again when I got it because it's so vibrantly alive about who we are and who we're not. We're not the shell. We're the watcher, the voice, the person in here, the soul. We're a soul with a body that we're going to get rid of, and we're not a body with a soul. So I'm not worried about where my soul's going because my soul is joyful. So but I do find I'm every now and then I'm looking at that predestination or some of the things my grandmother in the South would say, but I can get rid of those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea of original sin shows up for us in society with the ideas of self worth and being unworthy and, just unlovable. Those ideas, that's how it really begins to show up for us at the deeper level than, tainted kind of thing that we're bad. I think we can let go of the bad part, but sometimes that unworthy part kind of hangs on a little bit. That unlovable part hangs on a little bit. Colette.
Well, this really hit home with me because I am leaving this week to go help a loved one transition. And so, as you were talking about all this stuff, I was thinking about the, my sadness around it, taking away his joy. And at this point, it's not joyful for him because he is not a believer in God. He's an agnostic. So there's this side of me that wants to just get in there and let him know it could be so much easier if you had my beliefs. And so that is what I struggle with. And I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to keep the ego out of walking somebody home. And so, plus I'm dealing with my daughters going through it. It's their father, and it's just this has helped me a lot. It's helped me a lot, and I'm going to read the book thanks to Diane, and just see if I can do it with grace.
Yeah.
So I'll take prayers if anybody wants to
I
give them.
know you will do it with grace. And, it can be what if you thought of it this way rather than you need to believe like I believe? What if you thought, I think of it this way? Does that help you? I think of it this way. Just sharing stories sometimes. You're an angel for doing what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we have one more share. All right, Jennifer.
I I appreciate the perspective of understanding intellectually that we are God and God is us. Something about the way that you presented it today just makes it more clear for me that there's power in that. We're not just at the whim of some separate all powerful being. I have this because God said so. I don't have that because God said so. Just knowing that I have all of that same power to create in my own life what I want and to be who I want and to have what I want. and to help just by leading by example. I think you said other people see that, and then that also helps them understand better that they can do that as well. Still struggle a little bit with the concept of karma, or that tentacle that's like, well, if I do something bad, I'm going to be punished. That one's holding on real
Yeah.
tight. But thank you for the way that you delivered the message today, and I really feel like I got some clarity on that.
The only punishment is the effect of what we've set in motion. Yeah. So it's and karma, in cause and effect, karma is pretty instant. It's not something we carry with us. I don't know if you've noticed that. Yeah, it's pretty quick. Cut somebody off in traffic, then you get cut off about 5 seconds later, right? So yeah, it's cause and effect. Thank you all for sharing. I appreciate your gifts this morning, your intelligence, your wisdom, your willingness to play. And I would like to ground this in prayer and then have Jennifer come back up and do another song for us. So, taking that nice breath and just recognizing that that is life, that is our life. Breathing in, breathing out. And in the stillness, we recognize the divine. We recognize that God is all that there is. It is the one source, power, and presence. It is life. And it is love, unconditional, unconditioned love that loved so much that it gave of itself, is creating itself as expressions of each one of us. We are individualized and unique expressions of spirit, not separate from, not God in anything, but just God and God's presence here on planet Earth as us, as human form in the physical. And knowing that we are united in this wholeness, in this oneness, in this thing called life. And I speak my word this morning for anyone that has anything on their heart they would like prayer for. If it is grief, if it is sadness, if it is something joyful and gratitude, if there is a financial flow or abundance or creative ideas, clarity, whatever the need might be today, we as a community lift you into the light, into our prayer, into our consciousness, knowing the absolute truth and wholeness of you, of your situation, of your circumstance, of your condition, and just know, claim, and accept in this moment. It is healed, revealed, relieved, and blessed. And how grateful I am to know that we as community can come together in this power, can come together in this one mind, can state our affirmation, believing that it is true and that it is manifest now. And so, with a grateful heart filled with joy and thanksgiving, I release this prayer into the action of the law, knowing that it's already done, it is already complete. And we affirm that together by saying, and so it is.